specific area of focus for us is the upcoming ATO Next 5,000 Private Groups program. So you would have seen some material that went around last week, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Mike today to run us through the program, some next steps, answer any questions, and also our asks of you. But before I pass to you, Mike, while you're getting ready, a huge thank you to you, but also to our markets team in Stevie Pitcher and Kate Van Gilst. And also I know Patricia Muscat has played a huge role in bringing the material and the content together, as well as our go-to-market approach. So on that note, Mike, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Jade. Sorry again for the last minute kind of jump on here. I just had a back-to-back and didn't realise that it was so quick. But thanks so much for everyone joining. So today I just want to take everyone through the Next 5,000 program, which is due to start, I guess, in earnest next month. Part of the program is, I guess, an extension from where we've come from with the other Justified Trust program, Top 100, next Top 1,000, Top 500 for private clients, and now the Next 5,000. I'll just pull up a slide deck for everyone to hopefully see. Can everybody see that slide deck? Perfect. Thank you. So today's agenda, again, a program overview, the opportunity for PwC and running through that, some resources and tools that are available for everybody to use, Salesforce tracking, and then key contacts across the national practice. So as I just discussed, the Justified Trust Streamlined Assurance Reviews, or you may see an acronym SAR, are a bunch of programs released by the ATO over the last couple of years focused on different communities. It started with the Top 100, which is more relevant to the corporate tax space, multinationals and super funds. That extended to a GST review, and then on to the Top 1,000, as the name would suggest, the next 900. The next actions, you may also hear that being thrown around. That's really the next actions beyond the Top 1,000 and 100 programs. So again, focused on the corporate tax market, multinational companies and super funds. We're familiar in private clients with the Top 500, which focused on the largest 500 private clients groups. That started as the 320. Again, I appreciate there's a lot of terminology here, but it started as a 320. It was extended to 500 not that long ago and is well progressed. So that would be, call it 3/4 done, with most of our clients that are in that community already notified and at some point through the process. So the purpose of today is to talk about the Next 5,000 private client program, which deals with, as the name would suggest, the next 5,000 largest high net wealth groups. The cutoff for this group are for net assets over $50 million. So that's the key criteria. It's not a turnover in terms of revenue. It's a net asset test, which again has its own challenges in terms of identification, particularly with the data that we have. So what does it mean for us? I guess the Next 5,000 for PwC, we're aware of 142 clients that have been selected in the community. I've got a slide coming up which talks about where they participate in terms of which state they belong in. And I'll go through that with everybody because it gives a good insight as to where activity may be coming from in the current months. And we also deal with here what's the ATO trying to achieve. You may recall over the last few years, there's been a lot of terminology thrown around by the ATO in relation to tax certainty, but also building trust in society, which happens to link with our purpose. It's also been some terminology around tax gaps. So a tax gap is the theoretical gap between if a market was 100% compliant and what the market is paying in tax. They've published the tax gap for the top kind of 100 ergo and 1,000, and they've published the tax gap for the kind of top 500, 5,000 community. And as you'd imagine, the tax gap gets bigger and bigger as you go down in communities. So whilst there was a lot of noise around listeds and the tech space, those large clients and multinationals, their tax gap was actually much lower than what the tax gap is in the private client space, which is why there's a lot of resources within the ATO pointed towards private clients. So the tax gap for this community is something like 8%, and it was roughly half of that for the listed community. The tax gap for the next community down is something like 10%. So the importance of these programs from the ATO perspective is to ensure that the wider community feels like they have confidence the system is working. And if they do, the average punter on the street's likely to lodge a tax return and pay their tax on time. It's a system-wide issue, and they're worried that if they don't focus on this particular community, then the average punter won't focus on their tax. That's basically why they exist. So in terms of program overview, they're very similar to risk reviews you would have seen in the past if you work in private clients. It's just tagged as a next 5,000 program and has some pillars attached to it that are relating back to, again, a global program released by the OECD. I'll get to that in a second. But in terms of the risk reviews generally, what are they looking at? Much of the same we would have seen in the past. So, tax or economic performance not comparable, low transparency, big transactions, aggressive tax planning, tax outcomes inconsistent with the intent of the law. So again, this is at the more aggressive end. Choosing not to comply, large lifestyle assets, divisions F&A, obviously, and relevantly, poor governance and risk management systems, which is a new theme for this particular segment. That's created a lot of noise, I guess, amongst the private client advisor community, because there hasn't been a lot of focus in the past put on governance and governance frameworks and documentation. We've seen through the Top 500 program that it has a higher level of importance now. However, the ATO is very conscious that this community doesn't have the same level of resources or expect the same level of complexity that the listed groups would have. So whilst we originally thought there may be an opportunity to roll out, a massive amount of governance work to document that for these groups, the lived experience from the ATO has been they're not expecting so much that they have these beautiful documents. They want you to live the tax governance experience. They want to understand, what do you do beyond using PwC? Are the directors involved? Are the individuals involved in decision making? Do they understand? Do they seek written advice, or is it just emails or phone calls? Really practical things like that is what they're after and seeking to understand, so that they can get to a point where they have formed justified trust in the taxpayer, such that they can kind of leave them alone and put them on lower risk. If they can't form that justified trust, they will remain high risk, and they will remain open to reviews for all relevant review periods. So again, some specific behaviours, again, nothing should be a surprise here. Non-lodgement, business structures, transactions and taxes, tax crime, black economy and illegal Phoenix activity. This is where there's a bit of crossover between Tim Dice's group, who's the Deputy Commissioner for Private Groups, and Will Day, who is our ex-Deputy Commissioner, who is now leading up the serious tax unit. So we would hope that we wouldn't have too many of these within our next 5,000 communities within PwC, but there's just to give you an insight as to the ecosystem of how the ATO works. So I talked before about the justified trust process. It is an OECD concept. It builds on maintaining this community confidence that everyone's paying the right amount of tax. And I'll talk about 4 pillars. Again, it's very similar to risk reviews we've done in the past, just through the lens of 4 pillars. Effective tax governance is demonstrated, risks flags to market are not present or appropriately mitigated, and that's rulings, IDs, etc. Tax outcomes from new and significant transactions are explained. So again, relatively straightforward, and differences in accounting and tax results are explained. Again, very similar to what we've seen in the past. The only overlay would be effective tax governance being the first pillar. The program timing, it's already in theory commenced. There were a few pilots that were run last year, but they, because of COVID, obviously they've been put on hold, and the ATO has been threatening to release letters to the taxpayer community over the last couple of months, but continues to push it back as COVID has impacted mainly Victoria. And because it's a dynamic situation, they've wanted to hold on that. The latest comms from the ATO has been that they're commencing notifications of affected clients from October, i.e. next month. And they will continue to release those over the coming months, such that the first batch of that community has been notified. The program in its entirety is expected to last for 4 years, so it's here to stay. I expect it to be a bit of a slow burn, but a continual burn over that period of time. In terms of existing clients, here's a breakdown of that 142 and where they sit within our group. You'll notice that the vast majority are in New South Wales, but there's a spread across all of the other states. As you'd expect, I guess Victoria is the second highest. As I say, October is, from next month, is when notices will start to be sent out. There's a focus on New South Wales and Queensland because the ATO has decided that the disruptions in Victoria have caused enough grief and they don't want to cause any more grief in the short term, but they will pivot to Victoria once they have a few results from New South Wales and Queensland. In terms of targets, which we think is our biggest opportunity, we've got approximately 2 or 3% of the community that's been identified so far in the top 1,000, i.e. the 142, which means there's a massive opportunity to increase market share for us, and that's the size of the prize here for the firm. So we have a relatively low market share. How do we go out and grow that market share is part of where most of the resources and tools are pointed towards. We think we're very well placed as a firm to run pretty hard at that market share. It talks to our purpose of building trust in society and solving important problems. And obviously, we have a very well established and market leading private clients business. And we also have the benefit of operating within a larger firm, which has specialist tax skills, which we can bring to the table. Relevantly, part of the ask for the next 5,000 will be to tag tax controversy directors and partners to opportunities to ensure consistency and quality, but almost to act as in a barrister to solicitor type role, if you like, where you can take instruction on direction. When's the right time to make disclosures? When's the wrong time, etc. So you'll see more of that as my update emails are sent in the coming weeks and months, and as we learn more as we roll out the program. I talked earlier of resources. Everyone should have an email from Jade and a follow-up email from myself with links to the internal Google Hub, some sample emails to send to both client targets and clients and targets rather. And then we've set up an external landing page too, with the intention that it captures some search engine optimization should anyone in that community simply Google next 5,000 ATO. They're the resources that are available. Have a click through, have a read through. Most of the detail that we've talked about today is on there, and more. In terms of tools, we have a diagnostic tool which is currently in beta, doing its final round of R&Q checks. That tool can be used to essentially go to market. The idea isn't to necessarily use them on existing clients, but use them on clients that are new to firm. as a form of paid BD. The output of the tool is it's a slide deck, it's a traffic light report, which is just hitting on the key risk areas. And the idea is that we produce this report to a target. We're paid for it. We're targeting it, trying to get paid about $10,000 for the reviews. They're not meant to solve the world's problems. They're just meant to highlight risks and to be a deliverable for a conversation at a point in time. In essence, to give confidence to the target that we're the right people to lead the review for them. And in many cases, we may be working with their existing advisors, smaller accounting firms, etc. Whilst on that, I guess the channels to market for us have been, and I think continue to be, that advisor connection channel. So smaller accounting firms who may lack the confidence or resources to be able to roll these out effectively. And also the channels to market we have through investment advisors who don't compete in our space, but are often after relevant IP to share with this target community to show that they're up to speed and understand the risks and problems. So in some of the specific state-by-state targeting, I'd encourage everybody to think about those channels and how we best monetize those channels in addition to your own. Individual partners will make their own judgment calls as to who it would be in that community or may be in that community. And I encourage individual partners to look through your client lists and at a minimum send out the sample email that was provided, which at least flags the risk to the market that these reviews are there and that basically we're there to help. The clients that we do have, I guess the message is different to them in that there's less to worry about. They've got PwC behind them and always have. The message to the market would be a little bit more urgency in terms of flagging risks, and the ATO is coming and we're well positioned to help them. So the Salesforce part of this campaign, or part of this presentation rather, just shows you how to track the opportunities as we work through. We'd love to be in a position where our data internally is accurate to tell us how many next 5,000s we have merely by going into Salesforce. It'll also help us track our return on investment from a marketing spend perspective and how effective we're being from a market share perspective as well. So there's a bit of detail in that. I don't expect everyone to be on top of that straight away. You might want to take that away and think about it when the teams are setting up codes. We'll send this in a follow-up correspondence as well. This slide deck itself, I think, is being shared and will also appear on the Google Drive. Now, finally, I guess before we get to some questions, some key PwC contacts. So the way the program is being run is that there's a private client partner that's taking responsibility for each location. I say location as opposed to state because each office has a representative. So you'll notice, Rowan from Parramatta, for example, Amy from Newcastle, and Eugene from Canberra, albeit they're all part of our New South Wales practice. The numbers work out about right too when you look at the market share that New South Wales has of the top 5,000 within our existing client base as well. I just want to use this opportunity to call out Trish Muscat as well. Thank you very much for everything that you've done and continue to do in terms of content generation. She's amazing at doing what she does, and we're very lucky to have her. So with that, I might pause with 5 minutes to go or so and open it up to questions if there are any of the group. The presentation must have been entirely comprehensive with every single thing answered.
So it's lucky you had the dry run yesterday, Mike. So I think you've done very, very well.
So if you want to ask a question, just jump off mute. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Jade to close us up.
No, it looks like it's all good, Mike. So thanks everyone again for joining. Thanks, Mike, for hosting that session. Really informative and gives the team some really good content and materials to engage in some early discussions with their clients. So that's the ask of you all. If there are any questions, I'm absolutely sure that Mike will be happy to answer them post this, as will any one of those site leaders as well. So thank you all. Please get talking to your clients and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much.